David versus Goliath, a QEW battle. Toronto FC will be at Tim Hortons Field on July 10th to take on Forge FC in the semifinals of the Canadian Championship. For tickets, go to forgefc.ca/tickets or call 905-527-FORGE.
This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
Welcome to today's episode of Forge Daily. I am your host, Mackenzie Barwell, checking in June 26, 2024. Little out of schedule here. Normally you expect to see Milty on a Monday, but he joins me today. We discuss everything from the Valour matchup on Sunday to the upcoming one against Atletico Ottawa, plus exactly how close the standings are and what that means for Forge going forward. So we'll get to our conversation now. You can expect another episode of Max Access tomorrow. It's a really fun one with Dom Samuel. I wouldn't want to miss it. Plus, you've got a match to watch on Friday. So plenty of good content coming up. With that said, let's get right to our conversation. Here we go, Milty. Like you said, you got to switch gears and switch over the other football now.
Footy,
if you will. We've got a game to review and then potentially one to preview as well in today's episode. So let's start with Forge FC and Valour. Forge are back into the win column after a 2-1 win against Valour and now heading into a matchup against Atletico. So looking back to Sunday, Milty, I don't know. I mean, it was interesting because I did ask the guys whether or not they thought that a 2-1 score was reflective of how the game unfolded. And they said, yeah, but what would you make of that question, actually?
Well, I actually thought it wasn't. I thought they controlled the game so dominantly in the first half, except for that little flub near the end of the first half, and that actually didn't cost them because the header was offside, barely, but offside. And I thought they could have been up 3 or 4 at the time, and I think they did what they wanted to do on that one. I think the guys probably had a little recency there when they were talking to you, Mac, thinking about the second half a little bit, where they let down a couple times and let Valour kind of get back into the game, but I think that game, it felt to me like it was in full control most of the way. It wasn't quite so much as and I think I had a couple of players express the same situation to me, that they felt that you wanted to get that third one and completely put it away, and they had so many chances to get the third one when it was 2-0, and they got up 2-0 early. So I think one of the things they did, though, was to sort of get that. You could really hear the home crowd was on their side, and they really need to, I don't want to say reestablish, but kind of grab back home field advantage. And I don't mean that just necessarily in wins. I mean that in feeling as well, like that feeling that teams got to be scared when they come in here. Not so scared physically, but scared that they can lose.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And the crowd was fantastic. We had our Forging the Future match, so there were definitely some families out, some kids in some untraditional roles. I had a junior host with me, which was so fun.
Oh, I bet you it was, eh?
Yeah. I think Evie and I contributed to that energy to some capacity. But Milty, as you said, I think it's fair to say that primarily this game was in control of Forge, and I think that shows in the full-time stats as well. They had 57% possession, a lot more shots on target. Looking at that final 20 minutes of the game, and I spoke to Coach Bobby about this as well, he felt as though they weren't as good on the ball. And knowing that they have a lead doesn't mean that they can let up in any way, because as you said, they had opportunities to close it out, but so did Valour. So strangely enough, they probably had chances to tie it.
Right. As Bobby had said to you, I think just be a little sharper on the ball, just those little tiny things that, we noticed it in the last few games, that there's a few times that some of the passes are a bit late. I didn't see as much of that by any means. I did even the previous week when they were in Halifax, where even when they were going well at points there, they had some passes that seemed to just be, they were ill-considered, if not, and I would not use the word lazy for this bunch ever, but it felt a little bit like it just was that little bit off. And I know what he was talking about there on a couple of them, like for instance, there was a play when Nana got underneath the ball, right? I think, and Borges too, putting it to his weaker foot on a great play. that probably should have been goals, in which you've got to do that. A couple of shots that went over, and then a couple of them, some really good saves by their goalkeeper. So had any of those goals gone in and it's 3-0, now it's a whole different ball game there.
Yeah, well, 100%. And Milty, that was something that was talked about in the press conference afterward. Coach Bobby said, we need to be as ruthless in finishing as we are in creating chances, because it's not like the chances aren't there. They had plenty of opportunities. You highlighted both Nana and Borges, and it's too bad that Nana wasn't able to finish that one, especially with his debut at Tim Hortons Field. But I'm sure he's the most disappointed out of anyone.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that he's a spectacularly valuable addition to this team. When you add that to, the fact that he's played, and was roommates with Benny at one point, that, not at one point. I mean, they're best friends, and you can really see it out there. I mean, you can really see it.
Totally.
I mean, nobody understands Benny's heel pass better than Nana. Right. I mean, other players are starting to get a feel for it after a couple of years here, but he's got an almost psychic feel for it. And I mean, the guys really care about each other. I had a long talk with them last Friday, and they, or Thursday, one of those days last week, and they almost to the point of finishing each other's sentences, even though one of them is a talker and one of them is not. And that, Benny is a talker, right? And
Benny is the talker, if anyone didn't get that.
And he's also, you can see that that's reflected that who they are. What I don't want to say I know those guys 100%, but who they are off the field is kind of reflected on the field a little bit too. They're both totally extremely highly skilled, but one is sort of flashier, and the other sort of is more direct. I think that's the play, or what people use a lot to describe his play. Soccer players use to describe Nana's play. He's a direct player.
I think that friendship you're talking about, though, totally showed when Nana missed that goal opportunity, because Benny was the first one to grab him and start jogging back. And you can tell how much they care about each other. But you just mentioned, let's talk Kwasi and Kyle Bekker, because they were represented in CPL Team of the Week. I know you are quite familiar with Kwasi now after having your player spotlight with him. And of course, you've been familiar with Bex for a long time. But what stood out to you about these two guys after their performances against Valour?
Well, I thought Bekker was simply, captain, capital C in this game. El Capitan on this one. Everything. Every time you looked up and there was a play and a near miss on the offense, there was him, particularly from the left side, but he was also doing it moving over into the right side and into the middle. That the feed, that little touch pass through for the first goal was astounding. He was there setting up a couple of other guys for plays. I mean, that was a really good choice. I think he was man of the match too, was he not?
Kwasi was, I think.
Oh, Kwasi was, yeah, but it could have been Kyle. I would have had Kyle, actually. I would have had Kyle, even though Kwasi, I mean, a guy scores 2 goals, you have to make him man of the match, because it's so hard to score goals in soccer. I don't think those of us who didn't play realize how difficult it is to score a goal. And that's why the celebrations, and we talked about that last week with Kwasi, why the celebrations are so intense, because it's so rare to get a goal, and the games are all 2-1, 1-0, those kinds of things. You see the odd one that's a little higher score, but scoring goals is such a thing. And look at the 2 goals that he got.
Well, the first one, it was a reactionary thing, and he had to be there to make an effort, right? And of course, the chip. But I do want to talk about Bex for 1 second in terms of his role in both of these goals, because as you said, that first one in particular, you may have seen his role in a little bit more of a tangible form. But in the second goal, it was, I believe, Dash Wanier to bang a transitional ball over to Benny.
Yep.
But when Dav was coming up the middle, he was kind of evaluating all of his options, and you see him make eye contact with Bex, and Bex points to Benny, and it was immediate. Dav gets it to him, and then off that tackle, Kwasi is able to get on the end of it. So you just see Bex, he's so influential in ways that kind of fly under the radar sometimes.
Well, they really are, and it reminds me a lot of when Gretzky first came into hockey. There was a great book written about him where the writer compared him to a chess master. And here's what chess masters do that you and I don't do if we're sitting and watching chess, or probably doing anything else, is when we look at when a chess master looks at a board, and I don't know how many pieces are on a board, 40 or 50 or whatever that, they don't see 40 different pieces, right? They see one situation. And so it only uses, if you think of your brain as a computer, only one chip or only one little byte or bit of information, instead of the rest of us having to say, okay, left back's here, right back's here, rook, pawn are all here, those kinds of things. They say the one thing. So that one thing shift or can potentially shift, you're only using one bit of your brain to see that too, not 50 more. Again, that's Bekker on that play. He's seeing not only what it is at the moment, where this guy is, where that guy is, he sees that as one piece of information. So it doesn't, and so he can quickly move to the next bit of information, which is, if this happens, this guy will be open here and this guy will come through here. If this happens, that does that. And so when he points somewhere and says, go there, if you're Forge, you go there.
You go there.
Yeah. And it's not like an order thing. It's like a respect thing.
Yeah.
But there's a bit of an order. There's a bit of an order thing to it too.
No, but I see what you're saying. His brain's almost computational in that way, but I bet you if he asked,
very well said. Very well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, while we were talking teams of the week and celebrations, maybe I should mention that a couple of days ago you turned 21. So I looked up just one thing, and that is the numerology of 21.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And when you do the numerology, apparently you put the two numbers together when you get past 10, right?
Okay.
You have to do two single digits. So it's the combination of the 2 and the 1, right? So here's 2. 2 is harmony, cooperation, and relationships, right?
Okay.
And then number 1, which it's combined with or multiplied by, if you want to look at that way, independence, individuality, and new beginnings.
Ooh.
Mackenzie Barwell. Mackenzie Barwell. So,
thank you, Milty. Wow.
All right. Let's get back to this.
Okay. No. That's,
right.
I'm going to do a little bit more of a deep dive after this, I think.
All right.
Into that.
Do that. Yeah, there's probably way more to it than that.
Well,
there's all kinds.
Speaking of people who may seem more mature or older than they actually are, Kwasi Poku. Okay, let's go back to him because he's a young guy on this team and he's starting to establish himself as a potentially starting striker even when the other two are back in form.
Yes.
What's interesting too, I think, about Kwasi, Milty, is how humble he is. And I think, not to say that our other guys are overconfident in any way, but I do think that the average personality of a striker is a little bit more boisterous than a Kwasi Poku.
More flamboyant. Yeah, for the reasons that we mentioned near the top of the show. You got to want the ball. And you can't be afraid of failure. Right, because two things happen in soccer that get noticed the most: the ones the goalkeeper misses, or makes the great save on, and the ones the striker makes the goal on or does not. Right, especially because it's such a low-scoring game. There's some other things that went on with him in that game. If we look at that first goal, as you said, that was very reactionary. Plus, he also knew he was onside. It was a big mistake by the defender on that team, the outside defender on the opposite side of the field by Kwasi, because all he had to do was take one step backwards and that ball's offside, but he didn't. And that's unforgivable because he was in his vision line. There was nobody impeding his vision line. Kwasi knew that, I think, at the time, and that's why he was in position to tap it home. So and he wasn't going to miss that. He put it on the ground. It was a worm burner across the ground. Now the second one, he sees the goaltender coming in, and he does that little flip over the top. So that's two completely different skills done at high speed, especially the second one. The first one, he had lots of time to think about. The second one, he had no time. The guy's coming up on him, and he tries the little dangerous thing. And I thought at the moment it might hit bounce and then go over, but it was just a perfect flip over the goaltender. Yeah. And I was really glad that the defender got there late, because it would have gone in anyways, because the defender would have knocked it in. I'm glad he got there late and it wasn't an own goal. But we got to remember a couple of other things that he did. How about the time he broke down alone? Outran everybody down the left-hand side and set up and then dump, like it was unbelievable.
Right.
So that's another skill that he showed there, to open up the field. So when you do that, even if it doesn't come to you, it's not going to be your goal, which in the case was the case. The drive to the net sets up everything else because you become the person that everybody is coming in on. They've got 2 or 3 guys that love driving to the net and also can look backwards. But the speed on him on that were incredible. And I know that's what you really like about the young strikers on this team. There are 2 or 3 of them 21 and under on this team. And that's why I think Jordan's very important to this team. And the other striker as well when they get him back, because there's a certain age thing there that you're going to need at certain times.
Yeah.
And you're going to need that maturity. You're going to need them to come into a certain game when they have the lead, for instance, because they know how to play with a lead and also maybe get a chance to increase the lead, but also to make sure they don't do the thing that creates the turnover that goes the other way.
Right. Yeah. So important to emphasize that Kwasi was involved in all of these chances created, and sometimes they can go unnoticed when they don't result in goals, but you're right. Task defender for Valour ended up, I think, getting his head on the ball and then went to, after realizing there was no one behind him, Kwasi in a split second was there and he was gone.
Yeah.
So Kwasi, I think.
And really gone.
Yeah, like gone. Everyone on this team is.
If that field was 200 yards long, nobody was catching. Like it was take a look at that too. Look at the numbers on those, Mac. So he scores in basically the last second of play in the previous game in Halifax, and then he scores twice within 31 minutes. So in 32 minutes, he had 3 goals. 32 minutes, that's a third of a game. Consecutive
minutes, though, too.
Yes, consecutive minutes. Yeah, consecutive minutes.
That is insane. That's a really cool stat, Milty. Okay, well, let's transition here because I want to talk about the CPL standings just to set us up for Atletico. That win would bump Forge up to second place. Now they're only 5 points away from Atletico Ottawa, who's got 22. The standings, it's insane right now. We were talking about them earlier, but this is really close, man. And there's been a couple results that I think are worth mentioning that explain why they are the way they are. The one being Atletico coming off a draw against Cavalry, and the Wanderers picking up their first win of the 2024 season with an absolute dominant 4-0 performance against Vancouver FC. And that was crucial because Vancouver were hovering around the podium for a couple weeks. So it's looking real close here, Milty.
Well, and when guys like Bobby Spaniotis look at the standings early, and we started analyzing it, you and I, probably after the third game, right? I mean, Forge is sitting there 3-0, and just suddenly Vancouver's up there too, and Pacific's up there. Cavalry hadn't done anything yet. It's still, they're still going crazy with all those ties that their draws that they have. So yeah, it's a real sandwich in there. But now the standings, to me, I don't know, I'd like your opinion on this. The standings to me start to mean something right around now. When you get into double digits in games, you're more than a third of the season through. You're closer to a half. When you hit 14 games, you're at a half, and most teams except for Forge and Halifax are at 11. So you're very close to halfway through, and you can start to see something. So if you're this tight now that there's still a lot of time left, but there's still only there's 18, 17 games left, and the 3 points start to matter.
Yes, and Milty, let's just give some context here because I didn't earlier. Atletico Forge are 1-2.
Right.
York United, after beating Atletico, the game before their tie against Cavalry, are now third. Pacific fourth, and then to your point, that bottom half right now is Vancouver FC, Cavalry right below them, Valour, and then the Wanderers, who just picked up their first win. So continue, Milty.
So I was going to say that there really isn't. That's not so much a bottom half, because if you take the fact that Vancouver has 15 points and Cavalry has 14.
Oh yes,
and
yes,
really,
yes.
Yeah, it's really. So that's why and we'll get to Atletico in a minute. But when they get to the game that they play at Atletico, it's important to not let them get too far ahead, so that it does stay a bit sandwiched near the top, and that you can be distancing yourself, say, from York and those kinds of things. You want to be chasing or getting closer to that first place team than to allowing the, say, sixth place team, which is right now only three points behind you, and remembering that sixth place team is Cavalry, and nobody expects them to be the sixth place team. I don't.
No.
But if they can start finding some wins, I mean, they got frustrated again because they ended up on a tie. I think it was against Atletico, right? And it was at home too. So and
It's weird.
Atletico has
Yeah.
been, yeah, it's been weird, and every team has scuffled at some point. Now it's Vancouver's turn,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it may be at Atletico as well, right? Like they haven't been quite as sharp in the last few
Five
games.
games. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Milty, I was
Well, you
telling
were looking up the stats on that. What? Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier that they've got 2 wins of their past 5 games, and coming off a draw and a loss doesn't give them the most momentum coming into Friday.
They just there's just been something a little bit off on that, but they're a good team. I mean, they added all those players in the offseason. Everybody called them to be, maybe the team, and
Yes, yes.
so far they are the team,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, they have the one loss, and of course Calgary's only got one loss too, but the Calgary has 8 draws, which is already a franchise record, and they're barely a third into the season. They already have set the franchise record for most draws in the season for Calgary. And
Wow.
and I don't know what the league record is. I think it's 10 or 11 or something like that. So they're well on their way to having that. And lots of times draws are important, but not when you're sort of a powerful team or expected
Right.
to be a powerful team. But Atletico, you pointed out correctly at the start. You got to get some points here. I think this is the second game in Ottawa too. That's a good thing too. And I don't know if we were talking to Bobby if it mattered, but they tend to really grab home field advantage historically, Forge, particularly in the second half of the season, right? Usually from August on, you can count them to be maybe have one lousy game at home in which they go, "Who are we?" when that happened, but the rest of the time, and nobody answers Forge FC after that when they say, "Who are who are we?" when it's
Yeah, I see what you did there. Yeah, I was like, hold
yeah.
on a
So
second.
yes, all right, sorry, it was as obvious as a punch in the face, that one, but the having the 2 games in Ottawa, if they can get something out of this game, particularly to win, you'll have played your 2 games in Ottawa, and you have to count the first one, but they got 0 points out of that, but they weren't really there. They really weren't there, and I'll remind people that was 2 days or 2.5 days after one of the biggest win at this point, maybe the biggest win so far in franchise history. It's certainly in the top 4 or 5. I mean, when you count the championships as well, it's probably in the top 3 or 4 wins in franchise history in Montreal. And what I thought was, even despite the score, a decisive win against an MLS team. And they had almost no sleep. They're playing against a team that had 5 extra days rest than they had. They had about a half an hour of practice before that game. So they really weren't there. And it was really, they were in the game most of the game until the 70th minute or something like that, when the other team kind of pulled away. So you have to count that one in the standings, but you don't count it sort of in the psychological role that they're on. So
Yes.
So if you can get some points out of this one, even 1 point would be good. But I think 3 is what they want. If they get something there, you're done with them in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
And now you got the 2 games later in the year when you're traditionally establishing home field advantage more. Now, different teams, different years, and so things may not always be the same, but that's been the history.
Well, you're totally right. Preparation was the biggest thing that Coach Bobby talked about when I asked what's going to be different this time. And he really emphasized the psychological component, because maybe these players are professional, athletic enough to come back into form in terms of from a physicality perspective. But it's a matter of digesting the information that they have to learn now on Atletico and then applying that to the game. So it was just such a quick turnaround, and credit to Atletico too. I'm not trying to.
Oh, don't give them a ton of credit.
Yeah,
and their midfield's playing with a little more energy now than they had been. That said, I think they're still vulnerable in some areas. I think not press is the wrong word, but they attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so that when you said preparation, that's really, really important, I think, because it's recognizing where the holes are going to be, because there's going to be some big holes there if they keep coming in and like coming in, especially with that second and third. If you can make that one stop and then get it out of there, that's been one of the problems sometimes. Is there's been a little bit of messing around in their own end,
right.
And you can see it on every goal that's scored against them, almost every single one. You're going, But you could do that on any goal.
Yeah.
You could do that. Whoever's scoring, if only we'd done this, or they wouldn't have got that. But if you can make that stop, and then there's going to be a hole there. There's going to be holes. I'm not sure where they're going to be. Now, Atletico's not stupid. They've taken a look at, what works at times against Forge, what doesn't work, and they'll see what a lot of people see, which is in all soccer, that second man or third man coming through, and they're very good at that because they've got people like Ollie Bassett in that second wave coming in, and Manny Aparicio, guys like that come through the and go ahead,
Abu Siso,
your guy, yeah, that's right.
He'll be another big threat. Him, of course, Del Campo as well, who
absolutely,
beat a goal scoring record not too long ago in terms of the most goals scored in the earliest amount of matches possible in the season. So,
well, and Ollie really hasn't got it going yet in my mind, and I think he's due, and I mean he's a hell of a player. They got a lot of good guys there, and they've signed a lot of players that have either been finalists or have won various honors over the last 3 or 4 years. We mentioned that last time they were playing against Atletico. It's a good home crowd too. It's not just the team that lost that game that lost the championship on home soil a couple of years ago. It's the fans too, because they had a massive audience for that, and Forge kind of took them out of the game. And so the fans are aware of it as well. So and that's why I think they were so celebratory last time they were in there. So that they've got to try and take that. If they can get something going early, you can help take them out of it.
That is a great point. I remember last year I asked Coach Bobby what some of the most memorable fan moments were, and the first one he pointed out was essentially crowd surfing after winning the final in Ottawa. So I'm sure
it was amazing.
The fans of Atletico remember that just as well, and potentially holding a grudge, to your point on that, and know how bad the team wants it, and so do they. So
there could be some Hamilton fans down there. It's a Hamilton weekend again, as it was that year.
You're going to be there, no?
I'll be there, but I won't be for the game, unfortunately, because I have to work with the Ticats on the Friday. I'll be there for the game on Sunday. I'll get there Saturday. But that happened that year. They won the championship. It was reversed.
No way.
Yeah. The game was on the Sunday, as the championships usually are, and the Ticats, I think, they may have clinched the playoffs that night on the Friday night in Ottawa. So it was a big weekend there then too, and so a lot of Hamilton people go down for that. It's not very far.
You're right.
So there could be, that some of the battalion will be there.
I would not be surprised if we saw some orange in the stands, and I'm sure.
No, I wouldn't be either.
Battalion members. Thank you so much, Milty, for taking the time, and thank you for giving my numerology for 21. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's your birthday week, pal.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, the celebrations are not going to stop until next Monday. Okay, so.
All right, good. We want a detailed report. So.
Thanks, Milty. Best part of my week. All right, that will wrap up my conversation with Steve Milton. But one other thing I should mention before I let you go, this has come up since he and I talked. Tristan Borges with 5 yellow cards on the season, so he will suffer a 1-game suspension as a result. So this Friday, if you don't see him on the pitch, it's not an injury, but more of a disciplinary repercussion. So I would imagine next week that'll be a big topic of conversation with both Milty and I in our match day review, but also, of course, with Coach Bobby and Behind the Beard next week. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can tune into Max Access tomorrow. I had a really great conversation with Dom Samuel. And let's just say he proves the rumors to be true that he is a Bekker. So thank you so much again for tuning into today's episode. I'll check back in on the audio network tomorrow.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and share.